Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Hey gang, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is my absolute honor to bring to you this episode. It is not every day that you get the chance to talk to someone who has been a major influence on how you approach the occult, the way you think, the way you practice different skills. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Mitch Horowitz. And this is from Mitch's own bio. He's a widely known voice of esoteric ideas. He's a writer in residence at the New York Public Library, lecturer in residence at the University of Philosophical Research in Los Angeles, and the PEN Award-winning author of books including one of my absolute favorites, Occult America, One Simple Idea, Mind as a Builder, and his latest and newest book, which I highly recommend, The Miracle Club, How Thoughts Become Reality. Mitch has written on everything from the current real war on witches to the secret life of Ronald Reagan, and all that for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Salon, Time.com, and Politico. The Washington Post says Mitch treats esoteric ideas and movements with an even-handed intellectual studiousness that's too often lost in today's raised voice discussions. He narrates popular audiobooks including Alcoholics Anonymous and the Jefferson Bible. Mitch has discussed alternative spirituality and been featured on CBS Sunday Morning, Dateline NBC, NPR's All Things Considered, and throughout the national media. And Mitch has got quite an honor that I hope to one day earn myself. Mitch has been censored by the Chinese government. Well done, my friend. Okay, folks, listen. Mitch was on a tight schedule when we did this interview, and that means it may not run quite as long as a normal show, and the bonus audio section definitely does not run quite as long as it would. So I've decided that this is one of those rare opportunities to let everyone get a deep dive into how Mitch Horowitz is thinking. Why not let everyone hear what only the members usually hear in the bonus audio section? And if you find yourself enjoying the kind of questions I ask in the bonus audio section, or really liking the way that we go into different areas of the way my guests think in that time spent together, you can go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership, or go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio and join there. At the $5 level is all it is, less than the price of the caramel macchiato that I bought today, for an entire month of pretty cool stuff, including the bonus audio section, which you're going to hear today with Mitch Horowitz. It's featured with all of my guests. If you enjoy the show, please go out to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and all those other apps that you like to listen to. Subscribe and even comment, rate, leave a review, so it makes it easier for other people to find me. I don't want to stand in your way of the show any longer. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, here is Mitch Horowitz. Stay weird, my friends. Mitch Horowitz, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is an absolute honor to have you here, sir.
Thank you, man. Glad to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. I guess before we get too far into all the things I want to discuss, one thing I really want to know for sure is, what's one thing that you've become convinced beyond reason and doubt that is true about New Thought?
It works. It doesn't work on demand. It can be frustratingly inconsistent, but I have considered the facts from various perspectives, and I am certain that there's an extra physical dimension to the mind. And I am certain that when we focus on something with passion and emotion and a sense of rightness, both ethical rightness and rightness for self, things happen, and that our minds contribute to the creation of circumstances in ways that we don't fully understand, but we must never close the door on that question, that possibility, that experiment, because I would not be sticking with the New Thought principle that thoughts are causative if I didn't believe in my heart that it works. That's not the end of a question. That's really the beginning of a question. And it challenges the seeker to go further with his or her search. But without any hesitation, I would say to you and your listeners that New Thought works.
Now, with the certainty of this extra dimensional reality of the mind, those are your words, that comes with experience. So what happened that led you to that certainty? Because we don't just wake up one day and read something and say, yes, that works. You must have put this through rigorous testing.
Well, I could offer this anecdote or that anecdote about something unusual or interesting that happened to me. And I have some that I write about in my books, The Miracle Club and One Simple Idea. But I would say, speaking in terms of the here and now, where we are at the start of 2019, I have found that my fondest wishes in many ways have come true in terms of what I wanted to be doing with my life, what I wanted to be doing with my livelihood. And I would say my life has taken shape almost like a piece of sculptor's clay that's been well handled based upon thoughts that I've held and sustained for a long, long time. There are also areas of my life that are glitches and still frustrating and still difficult. And I think probably I have not yet succeeded in bringing my thoughts to a place that I want to see caused and selected in the outer world. And that puts me in front of a big question and challenge and task for the new year. And that's something I've been reflecting on.
I like that you spend that time reflecting on these things. And, I've followed your work for a long time. And it's been obvious that you're willing to explore into many avenues, especially along the fringes of studies of consciousness and even occult practices, to find the answers that you're looking for. So what is it about all of this that keeps calling you into it?
Well, I think I was first attracted to New Thought because it requires only the self. It's self-sufficient in a certain way. You don't have to belong to any congregation, any doctrine. There's no label that you have to hang on yourself. It isn't something that you need to tell your friends, neighbors, families, coworkers that you're doing. I mean, your thoughts are your own exquisitely private domain. In fact, it's probably the only place on earth today in which we're still possessed of total and complete privacy. We don't need to seek the approbation or the approval or the participation or the cooperation of other people. It's all up to the individual. I'm very oriented towards aspiration. My search is not grounded in non-attachment, non-identification. I believe very strongly in the individual creating and striving and aspiring in the world and seeing through in life the projects that he or she wants to establish and get across. They may not all be successful. They may not all come out the way the individual wishes, but I take very seriously the idea that each person is here to create, to be generative, to produce. So New Thought at its heart is aspirational, and it honors the individual pursuit of power, of means, of projects, of finances, of physicality. I want all those things. I want others to have all those things. And part of that, not all of it, but part of that is vested in our thoughts. Maybe ultimately it's all vested in our thoughts, but I'm not at that place where I can speak from experience that life is absolutely subjected to my thoughts or to your thoughts in terms of our reality and our experience. I believe that's true. The only hesitancy you're hearing from me is that I don't feel we should ever speak about someplace authoritatively that we've either never been or just visited on vacation. You really have to live there. I don't live there permanently, so I have to speak in terms of mind as an influence rather than as an ultimate arbiter. But I do that because I'm searching, and I don't want to speak as if I somehow have my fingers on the buttons. I do not. But don't neglect the buttons. Don't neglect the buttons, because they are there and they do respond to us.
Yeah. You're absolutely right when you say that, you know, don't neglect the buttons, because they're there
Yeah.
and we can use them.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to test this out, there's been, I mean, New Thought's been around for a long time.
Long time.
And what you're doing with the Miracle Club, I think, is adding a lot of new ideas and approaches to this. I think you're being more demanding on the tester and the seeker to not just wish for something or put up a board of images that you would really want and focus really hard on. And I think you're almost like the chaos magicians when they started writing in the early 90s about, you know, we're just looking for the techniques that work. Would that be an accurate comparison?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I love about chaos magic. It is so ends oriented, and it's so oriented toward the means that work. And, you know, it's funny. I've been experimenting with chaos magic over the past few months, and I personally have not had success with it. I've used specifically sigil magic, and it hasn't brought me anything. But I don't say that in a spirit of discouragement, and I don't say that in a spirit of disrespect for my brothers and sisters who are involved in chaos magic, because I love chaos magic and I love ceremonial magic, but we all have different styles that work for us. You certainly would never expect that every artist, whatever walk of life he or she occupies, would have one fixed method that they got from somebody else. The artist has to find his or her own method. Every writer has his or her own method of writing. They have certain things in common. They're not ponderous, they're work-oriented. They throw themselves into a piece of work with great passion. You have a limited amount of energy that you can dedicate one sitting at a time. So every writer, for example, is going to have certain things in common, but there's not going to be one common methodology that each one cleaves to. So when you put certain aspects of chaos magic into a book, it's almost like getting away from the ethos itself. But that's true of all spirituality. I mean, all spirituality is based in experience, and then we codify it into a doctrine. New Thought is the same way. So I love chaos magic, and I love the people who are participating in it. I just don't want anybody to be discouraged because a certain method doesn't work for them. It may be that there are people listening to this exchange who have had wonderful experiences with chaos magic and feel New Thought is not for them. And I embrace that and I applaud that, because we all have to find what form of magic works best for us. So I welcome the comparison to chaos magic, because I think there's so much intellectual sharpness and validity and intelligence within that world. There's also results. Those results haven't been mine. So my task is to continue with New Thought and to try to figure out ways of sharpening it, making it more powerful for myself and others.
Well, since you're exploring into chaos magic and experimenting with using sigils right now to find results, and please let me be one of the first, if no one's ever done it, I don't know, to congratulate you for just being brave enough to say that you're willing to explore into these realms and really put them to the test. But you've been a very successful practitioner of New Thought. Where are the differences in, let's say, the approach to using sigil magic versus applying New Thought techniques to achieving results?
That's a great question. And there's one very, very big difference which I've wrestled with. And as I say this, I also say it realizing that at the end of the day, these two roads may converge, as truth always converges. It almost has to in a certain sense. So here's a difference that I've found on the ephemeral scale, with the caveat that the difference I'm about to describe may not be a difference the closer and closer you get to what's actually going on. But here's one big difference. The chaos magician, let's say again, to stay on the topic of sigils, but it could be anything. He or she draws up a sigil. And the whole point of a sigil is that it's supposed to be non-representational, okay? And by using this non-representational symbol, we are bypassing the cognitive. We are bypassing the rational. We are associating the symbol with our desire only in the most abstract way. And then let's say we're bringing ourselves to some sort of a state of deep meditation or ecstasy in connection with our perception of this symbol. And we are purposely allowing this symbol, in a sense, to become a certain stand-in for the thing desired. But it's not the thing desired. And it's not supposed to represent the thing. It's not supposed to literally represent the thing desired or even remind us of the thing desired. Its whole purpose is vested in deep abstraction. And then we perform our ritual, either meditative or ecstatic or whatever, and then the job of the magician is to forget all about the symbol. Forget it, and just go back to your life. And there are aspects of ceremonial magic, of course, that are that way as well. Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, somebody I admired very deeply, used to get asked by people, well, gee, my ritual doesn't seem to work. Why is that? And he said, because you care too much. You have to go back to your ritual and you have to burn through it, burn out and expunge all the desire from your system, and then just go about your life, and something will happen and it will come to you. Okay, so that's a outlook that you find within chaos magic, within ritual magic, and so on. New Thought is different. New Thought is such that you're really supposed to live from the end. You're supposed to attempt to live within the emotional feeling of your wish fulfilled, in a certain sense. You might concoct a very vivid, emotionally charged mental picture of your wish. You might walk around the streets of Queens, New York, feeling that you want to be on the streets of Paris, and you hold to that, and you cleave to that, and you go through the day that way, and you go through your relationships that way as best you can. You go to sleep in the feeling that you're living in Paris. You're not trying to be abstract about it or to forget about it. You're trying to actually come into contact with the tactile and emotional feeling state of having attained that which you want. That seems to me, for me, to work better than the approach I was just describing, which may be flawed, in terms of my iteration, my definition may be up for grabs. But that's my understanding of chaos magic, of ritual magic, ceremonial magic. And New Thought is more almost like you adopt a lifestyle mindset, and you hold that lifestyle mindset. You might at some points forget about it and go about your day-to-day life, which may actually provide a clue of ways in which these two forms of magic start to converge. But the idea is to arrive at a tactile and emotional feeling state and to stay with it as long as it feels natural and real. So both methods are attempting to tap some reservoir of mind that you might colloquially call the subconscious mind, or I don't know, let's choose a different term, call it the transcendental mind. It's some form of mind that is existent beneath the surface or beyond the boundaries of the cognitive and the motor physical. It's not supposed to be rational. It's supposed to be creative. It's supposed to be emotional. And so the approaches differ insofar as the chaos magician taps this transcendental mind and then uses a kind of code so that he's not locked into a state of hope or longing, which is seen to be counterproductive. The New Thoughter uses the very literal imagery of what he or she wants. The more vivid, the better. And the New Thoughter, too, is attempting not to be in a state of hope, of longing, but rather to come into a state of satisfied realization. So as I'm talking, you can hear that these two differing approaches that I'm describing to you maybe are not so different. Maybe they do converge. But the idea of burning or tearing up or turning the page on your sigil and forgetting about it, that's not exactly been my practice. That's not exactly my approach. My approach is to try to live within the skin of what I'm looking for. So these are the differences that I experience. And within my description of those differences, I think you can also hear possibilities of convergence.
Yeah, I certainly hear a possibility of conversions. Based on my own experiences, I would say you came just short of saying it yourself, and I think you probably realize this. Both practices are coming to a point where you do the work, the ritual, or the utilize the methods to which you are bringing the results into your life, and then you try to go about your life as if you already have it.
Yes, although the it probably would be something that the chaos magician would not want to be focused on. And that's a question I have. That's a question I have for the chaos magician, because it seems to me that, let's say there's a certain romantic partner you want, but it could be any number of things. You're going to feel that with a passionate intensity. And I don't know, frankly, that it's possible within the framework of human nature to forget about it, so to speak, to feel satisfied that you got that out of your system when you were doing your ritual, when you were doing your magic. I don't know. And this is a dialogue I want to be in with chaos magicians.
Yeah. In situations like that, I'd say, first of all, it's important not to target a person specifically, probably for all sorts of ethical reasons, maybe. And secondly,
Yeah, I'm
I
just
think
pulling
it's
that out of the air. There could be any number of things,
yeah,
financial or,
but
the completion of
strategically,
a project. But anyway, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You're
no,
raising a good question. Do you feel, and I'll put this question to you since we're both seekers and we're in dialogue, when it comes to passion and romance or anything where you want somebody to play a role in your life, do you feel it's negative to focus on the other person?
um, yeah, I do to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
and my reason being is I think it's far more productive, I think, than to focus on ourselves. To
Yeah.
become the kind of person that would attract, whatever it is we really desire in our life, especially when
Yeah.
it comes to a potential partner,
Well
rather
put.
than try to
Well put.
find some way to shoehorn a partner into our life. We should become the person that maybe attracts that kind of other into our lives, if that makes sense.
Well put. It does make sense, but let me deepen this question and let me put this to you this way. And again, I welcome us being able to do this because I can't do this on NPR. I can't
Right.
turn around and pose the question about his or her spiritual practice. I'll get blacklisted. Um, and but what if you, as a creative individual, decide you do want a certain person or project or whatever in your life? Maybe by avoiding that or approaching that indirectly, you are blunting the creativity that is your natural possession, and maybe being very, very specific, even if it is, for example, about a romance partner. Um, maybe it's your birthright to be very specific about that. Maybe there's a bravery and a power in
Yeah, maybe. But I can take this show as an example. Uh,
that. Mm-hmm.
Through reading the Kevin Smith's biography about how he got started into show business and then led to him doing a lot of podcasts, listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast quite a lot on iTunes and other places. Just felt inspired, thinking, one, I wanted my own show, and two, I'm never going to hear most of the people I want to talk to on the shows I listen to. Like you said, they're not going to talk about these sorts of things on NPR. They're
Right.
also not going to talk about him on Tim Ferriss's show, as good as he is. So,
Yes. Right.
so I had to do something about it. Well, I take a strategic approach. I've got the final goal in mind, but I've got to know what the steps are to get there. So the more effective sorcery or magic, if you will, going towards that ultimate goal is to think, well, first I need to know what the best microphones are, and I need to know what the recording equipment's going to be, and I need to know the best way to produce the show and edit the sound, edit the sound, and then a platform to get it out to the public. And it's got to have steps to get there. And I think even when we go back to, like you were talking about sigils and chaos magic, I think the more we're clear on the steps to get there, whether you're using chaos magic, ceremonial magic, or new thought, to bring those steps into clarity and achievable means is the best route forward, I found in my own experience.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I sympathize with that. One of the areas where I think we have to be careful, though, is not confusing the means with the ends. And that's something I'm working with, especially this year, because sometimes people will say, I want a certain job. And it's possible that they do want that job, but what they might want at the back of it is security. And sometimes we all have experiences, I think, where we're so glad that we didn't get something because it might have represented something that we thought we wanted, but it was the wrong vessel. And I think we almost get saved from ourselves in a certain way. I'm trying to observe this within New Thought, where I can think of instances in life. There was one instance back in 2006 where I went to visit a particular publishing house. I used to be a publishing executive at Penguin Random House. I went to visit this offbeat publisher, and I was absolutely certain that I wanted to work there, that I wanted to be the editor-in-chief of this place or have some sort of executive role there. And boy, if we could flash back to May of 2006 when I first visited these people, I could be very persuasive about why I wanted to be there and what it would do for me. And it didn't work out. In fact, it was frustrating. I hit a variety of dead ends, and I couldn't understand what was going on because it seemed to me like it was so perfect. And now I must tell you, I look back and I'm so grateful that it didn't work out because it was right at the beginning of my writing career. And it actually turned out to be a very troubled place. And if I had gotten what I felt so strongly I wanted, I would have been hamstrung, probably in terms of my writing, in terms of my personal appearances, in terms of having free time. And all my energy would have gone into trying to straighten out this place, which may not be capable of being straightened out, which may not be savable. And so I look back and I'm very grateful. And that sort of brings us to another vista, which is people often say, how can you know what you want? We don't have perspective. And I have two things to say about that. And again, these are all experiments. Sometimes I think that what we want, what we really want, actually comes to our rescue. What I really wanted at that time was creativity and independence. And I have that now in boatloads. So I think that my mind actually read that which I really wanted versus this off-ramp which represented to me what I wanted but was the wrong thing. So that's one thing. I think we kind of get saved from ourselves in a way. It's one of the graces of human nature. Human nature is filled with so many problems, but I think that it's filled with graces and vistas as well, and that's one of them. The other thing is I do believe that at exquisite moments, we do have perspective. I don't think we're completely bereft of or denied perspective. We do have perspective at certain important moments, and that's part of our birthright too, and we should never sacrifice that.
You get to a point there where you're saying that our mind almost saves us from ourselves. So, I mean, you work on the premise,
Yeah,
I'm going to use your own line, that thoughts are causative.
Yeah. Say that again, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just thinking of how I would like to ask this question, because on one hand, thoughts are causative, and we take up a practice to achieve our desired outcomes. And on the other hand, even if we're super clear on what we want, you're suggesting that our mind may even step in the way and save us from what we ask for.
Yes, I believe so. I think if we're really clear, really clear in terms of our desires, I do think that our mind, in its creative capacities, in its causative capacities, in its capacities of selectivity, our mind acts on that which we really desire versus the ice cream cone that we think is going to fill us up. And it may not fill us up, and it may not be nutritious, and it may not be good for us. But but actually our mind can direct us to something that's actually responsive and nutritious and answering of that which is needed, we get saved from ourselves a lot, I believe. I really do. So in that sense, perspective is not a huge hang-up for me. It is vital that we be honest with ourselves about what we want. And that can be very embarrassing, because even if it's private, there are things we don't like to share about ourselves. Money is an easy example because maybe it's sort of mundane, but the so-called spiritual person often tells himself that he's not interested in money. But that's not always true. Sometimes people are intensively interested in money, and you can tell by their actions that whatever they're telling themselves about themselves is perhaps not quite it. And so I think we do have to be very, very clear with ourselves about what our desires are. And if we're really clear and really unembarrassed and really direct with ourselves in ways that we're not even comfortable being, perhaps, that can be a true saving grace from steering ourselves in the direction of something that seems to represent our desires but really is counterfeit.
Now, how would you suggest someone gets really clear about their desire?
Well, I provide exercises in the Miracle Club, and none of them would be particularly shocking in terms of their mundane practice. But whatever exercise you do, whether it's journaling or whether it's dream work or whether it's sitting down and writing lists and honing them down, the key thing is to feel a deep passion and dedication to be absolutely frank with yourself, to the point where you might make yourself uncomfortable. I'm inspired by a book that not many spiritual people read, and that is Sammy Davis Jr.'s autobiography, Yes, I Can. It's a wonderful, wonderful book, and it's beautifully written. He was always very frank with himself about what he wanted and what he needed, and he went through terrible hardship in life. He grew up on the vaudeville circuit, touring the country in the age of Jim Crow. He was not only discriminated against, he was not only treated in hateful ways, but he was physically assaulted. I mean, he went through a tremendous amount of violence in his life. And it was only much, much, much later that these violent assaults, even after he had become nationally known, abated. But so he speaks from a real world perspective, as real as it gets. And he was always so brutally frank with himself about just what he wanted, just what his aspirations were, just what he liked. And it's worth reading, because when you read that book, you'll encounter the voice of a truly honest person. It's a beautiful book. It teaches you a lot about America, too. And that's just one example. But I would say, take a look at that. Figure out, what do you want? And what are you willing to sacrifice? Because you will sacrifice things as well. But that dedication to being honest and the realization that we are not honest with ourselves in the most private recesses of our minds, that could be revolutionary. That could be the most important thing that ever happens to a person. Be honest. Be passionately honest with yourself. You don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. In fact, it's better not to. But when you get to that point, that can be the opening of a door.
Well said. What causes you the most frustration in your work?
Wow. What causes me the most frustration, I would say, is that sometimes I just want to control people's responses to things, and I can't do that. I can put the thing out there, I can bring a crop to market, but I can't control the responses, of the end user. And that's an area where I have to realize it touches upon something you were saying earlier, which is the ethics of wanting to make another person or another person's the responses the subject of my magic or the object of my magic. And I can't control other people's responses. They are rooted in the infinite just like I am. They have their own needs, abilities, disabilities, just like I do. And that's a frustration that I think I have to be working with. That I have to work with.
If there was, I guess, an example of when you would have liked a different response, something you could have, if you could have controlled the outcome better, what would it have been?
Oh, well, I'd like an audience that's, 100 times the size of my current audience, and I can't control that, I'd like my books to be popular all over the world and to sail up bestseller lists. And I have my reasons for all of that. But, at the same time, I'm unwilling to sacrifice what I see as the integrity of my message to do that. I love my audience members. I mean, I hear from people all the time by email and social media. I respond to almost everyone. I try to. And they're the most wonderful people on earth because they're seekers who are also grounded. They're people who have very, very deep spiritual questions, and they're not willing to just buy into anything. They don't indulge in fantasies or magical thinking. They don't use words like enlightenment or things that are so far away from us we should never speak about them colloquially. I love my audience members, every single one of them. I love them. I just wish there was, 100 times more, but I can't control that. That would probably require, controlling human nature. And since I haven't been put in charge of things, I can't do that. So, of course, somebody could say to me, well, gee, that's a legitimate aim. Just imagine your audience size being 10 times as big and it will occur. And they may very well be correct, but that hasn't occurred yet. And that takes a lot to move that boulder, because I won't compromise my message. And my message is exactly what I'm sharing with you here on the show, and it's what people will find in the Miracle Club and Occult America or any of my books. I don't deal in these absolute kind of cause and effect miracles, although I do believe miracles do occur, and I use the word in a very unembarrassed way. But the conditions under which they occur are very mysterious, if tantalizingly suggestive. And so my path is one of experimentation. It's also one of aspiration, which turns off some people. Some people feel I'm too materialistic, I'm too outwardly focused. So these are all areas where I'm just trying to be as starkly honest with my reader as I would be with a dear friend who came to me for advice. So I love my audience members, and I just wish there were a whole lot more of them. But maybe within the framework, the human framework, the cosmic framework that we live in, it's necessary that this message be found by a certain number of people. Anyway, the new book is doing very well, so I'm heartened by that. So maybe I'll get my wish. Who knows? We'll see how 2019 works out.
And that's a message I can get behind. I'd like all those things myself.
Yeah.
You bring up so many points that I'd like to get into. And I know we're on limited time, so I'm going to pick my battles as wisely as possible. There's this element of experimentation to your work, and you say some of the criticism is that you're very materialist in your approach. But I've also heard you say on other shows, maybe it was in a video you had, but at any rate, that you've even experimented with calling out to ancient gods such as Mercury in public, unapologetically.
Yeah, absolutely.
What inspired you to take on an experiment or a practice like that?
Well, I do believe that there's invisible help available to us in this world. I do believe that we're part of something greater, and I do believe that our ancient ancestors sometimes named these energies in certain ways. Mercury is just one example. And it is possible that these entities so named may even have a personal quality about them. I don't have the door closed on any of this. It may even be that the ancient gods are terribly lonely, and that these personified qualities desperately want company and desperately want human veneration. And there's so little of it nowadays. So it's entirely possible that if a person with a deep-seated sense of seriousness were to make an appeal to an unseen entity by name, it could be that that energy that was personified, given personification, so named, so identified in the fullest sense by our ancient ancestors, would be very receptive to the call from a dedicated seeker, dedicated person. So I would suggest that for an artist, or for somebody who's in financial need, or for somebody who has a question of romance or something like that, know what you're doing. Don't be casual about it. Don't be immature about it. But maybe it's worth looking into the lexicon of non-physical beings, the lexicon of gods and deities and demigods. Maybe there's some entity there that will be in very deep sympathy with you. And maybe that entity will be receptive to a personal appeal. It could be the greatest breakthrough of your life. Something extraordinary could happen. Why put limits on your experiments? I was always inspired by something that was said by the teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he said in essence that the greatest barrier to personal exploration or creative endeavor is the wish for respectability. So throw away the wish for respectability. Experiment. If people take one idea away from our conversation today, my wish is that it be that.
Bringing up these invisible forces that could be at play in our lives, have you ever experienced a haunting?
No, I haven't. I'd be very delighted to, but I haven't. I have 2 antique Ouija boards. I decided to try them out over New Year's, and absolutely nothing came from it. I'm tired of hearing people issue warnings about Ouija boards. These are just canned things that are designed ultimately, I think, to put parameters around people's experiments, however well-intentioned the person issuing the warning may be. Wonderful things have come from Ouija boards. I'm not obsessed with Ouija boards. It just so happens that I have an antique one out on the table here. Anyway, nothing's ever happened to me, but I encourage everybody to experiment as broadly as they want to, as long as it's consensual and as long as they're not doing something that's going to cause violence to themselves or another human being.
What do you consider controversial in your work, especially concerning New Thought? Where are the problem areas?
Well, one of the things that generates controversy in my work is I speak very frankly about being interested in a vision of Satanism that's not understood by most people in the 21st century. To me, the satanic is the most misunderstood concept in our spiritual life, and I'm determined to help rescue it from that misunderstanding, because I view the satanic as an energy, a personified energy, apropos of what we were talking about earlier, that represents rebelliousness, experimentation, artistry, usurpation, revolutionary traits and qualities, the overthrowing of staid old energies. And I view the snake in the garden not as an oppressor or as a trickster in the lowest sense, but as an emancipator. I've written about this in some of my essays at medium.com and elsewhere. Some people hear it and get it. Some people hear it and they can never get it because they're so attached to the version of Satan that they thought about growing up that no matter how well or carefully I explain it, they revert back to saying, oh yeah, well, what about this? And they're just speaking again from their own choice of telescope that they're looking through. They're not looking through my telescope. And so that's the most controversial area of my work. But I'm proud of it because I've never backed off on it. I've never been euphemistic about it. I've never tried to hide from it. Again, I can talk about other things. That's not the only thing on my mind, but it is a very, very, very important thing on my mind. And I refuse to conceal my search. I just refuse to conceal it.
Why did you find yourself researching Satanism and modern Satanism in the beginning?
I used to dismiss Anton LaVey, who I mentioned earlier. He was the founder of the Church of Satan in 1966. Anton died in 1997. I never knew him, but I wish I did. I wish I knew him today. I think back then I was too young to have really gotten anything out of it. But I was reading a wonderful, wonderful book that I recommend to everyone called Occulture by my friend Carl Abrahamson. And Carl worked directly with Anton, admired Anton very, very deeply, loved him. And Carl writes a chapter in tribute to Anton and also analyzing Anton's work as a magician and intellectual in his book, Occulture. And when I read it, it was as if these blinders came off my eyes. I saw Anton in a whole new light as a great magician, as a great social thinker, as a great observer of human nature. There was just so much as an artist. There was just so much that was exposed to me in Carl's work. So I wrote this article for Medium called Good Clean Satanism, which was a re-examination of Anton LaVey through the inspiration and the education that Carl had given me in his work. And as I was writing the article, I thought to myself, I am really diving into the deep end of the pool here. and I'm going to stay at this deep end of the pool because that's how I get exposed to new things. When I meet a person or encounter a historical figure or teaching that suddenly seems fresh and new and vital and alive to me, I throw myself into it. That's how I learn. That's how I experiment. If there is growth, that's how I grow. And so when I encountered Carl's work and when I revisited Anton LaVey, it just opened up a whole new vista to me. And that vista has not stopped expanding. So that's how it began. And that was not long ago. That was in, let's see now. That was not long ago. That was less than 1 year ago. That was probably December of 2017. So I'll say the name of the book again, A Culture by Carl Abrahamson. Wonderful book. I recommend it highly. It's added wonderful dimensions to my life over the past 12 months.
I'll second the recommendation. I've got the book on the shelf right next to me.
Sweet.
And I'll have to give you credit for it. I picked up that book after hearing you and Carl on another show just talking to each other. I thought, I've got to know more about what's going on there.
Harry Potter. Yeah. Why every kid now wants a wand, including my younger son. Yeah, that was a great dialogue. That meant a lot to me to be able to do that.
That was fun. Now, since you've only been exploring Satanism and you've got your reasons for going, as you said, into the deep end of the pool there, I'm going to ask you again to compare or at least think about what you find in Satanism that has informed or improved your new thought practice.
It helped me to be more honest with myself. It helped me to be more clear internally what I wanted financially, artistically, sexually. It made me look at myself in the mirror that much more clearly. And there are lots of other things as well. Life is so mysterious. And on one hand, I'm very dedicated to the teachings of the great Neville Goddard, who teaches that your imagination is God. On the other hand, and without a feeling of contradiction, I don't close the door by any means on the existence of deity. And for me, Satan is a personified energy, a deity, if you will, who can be called upon. And I do call upon him. And I feel that that has added a wonderful layer of experimentation to my life. It's also brought me wonderful things, as well as brought me chaotic things. And you can't have the rose without the thorn, you know, and we have to accept that within life, and I think this is inherent in the story of Eve eating the apple and begetting two sons, one of whom commits an act of fratricide. The creative act brings with it inevitable frictions, and I do not think that can be escaped. Satanism has helped me understand that.
You know, there's a climate in our culture today, especially in the Western world, that is creating a larger and larger divide between political ideology, personal worldviews, and so on. And people are really sort of drawing line in the sand, and it boils even down to books, as an example. There are authors who are now considered so controversial, and I would throw people like Anton LaVey into that mix. That's right. That no one would be willing, I think, to listen to the ideas that you get from an author like Anton LaVey, because all they can see is Anton LaVey. So how do you separate, even for, I mean, I know you admire Anton LaVey, and I've got no problem with that, but how would you separate the content, or explain to others how they could, of ideas that are being professed from the person that is putting them out in the world, that they're not necessarily always identified with each other?
That's a wonderful question. There's so much there, and I'll try to be as concise as I possibly can. I don't want people to feel that all heterodox thought is created equal and deserves equal respect. It does not. And although I encourage people to be very deep and very wide-ranging with their experiments, that does not mean a disregard for standards, a lack of measurement, a failure to evaluate. So, for example, I would challenge somebody to read Anton LaVey's book, The Satanic Bible, for example, and to find something in that book, or in any statement that he's made, that dehumanizes another person, that somehow objectifies or disparages a community, a group, an individual, in some way that's going to humiliate or detract from that person's existence or endanger that person. His was not a voice of violence. In other words, his was not a voice that would seek to violate another person's highest aspirations and sense of self. His desire, although sometimes with rough verbiage and maybe even sometimes with rough treatment, was to bring a person into their highest sense of self. That was his ultimate aim. So for me, Anton's work provides insight and it's ripe for experimentation. But the very fact that I would encourage people to be broad-ranging doesn't mean there are not standards. Of course there are standards. So by contrast, I'll take an author like David Icke, for example, who's very, very popular today, sells many, many books, has large audiences. I think he's a terrible influence. And I think he promulgates some of the worst ideas that exist in our culture because he perpetuates an us versus them attitude, which is at the very heart of conspiracism. It's violent in its essence because it looks at the problems of the world and encourages a person not to look in the mirror with stark honesty, but to look at his or her neighbor with a finger pointed and with a metaphorical stone thrown. I think Icke is a terrible influence because I think he takes all the legitimate outrage that people feel at the lack of transparency in our culture, at the lack of democratic decision-making in our culture, at the lowest iterations of profit-making that control our culture. And all that legitimate outrage gets misdirected into an absolute dead-end ditch because he's convinced that these things are the fault of something called the Illuminati, which he knows nothing about, that there are always international bankers and figures of Jewish historical descent who are present at the scene of the crime, even though he professes to have nothing against anybody. I don't buy that. And I think that you're looking at someone who actually epitomizes the narrowest form of a shutting down of questioning, a promulgating of paranoid us versus them thinking, and leaps of logic that are hidden behind all kinds of source material that in many cases is itself the product of leaps of logic and is no better as a source than saying, well, it just is because it just is. So I don't think that just because somebody is outside of mainstream thought processes, their work is valuable or warranting of exploration. It's certainly warranting of sampling so that you know what you're talking about. It's warranting of reading so that you're not speaking from a once removed perspective, which is another problem in our culture. But I think that if you were to run down a list of everyone I've admired and written about, Anton LaVey is a good example. Neville Goddard is a good example. There are lots of other figures very different from those people. Manly P. Hall, Edgar Casey, many, many, many people. Madame Blavatsky. I find something in their work that is deeply redeeming and valuable and important, despite their foibles and failures and the dead ends that exist, which exist in the work of all these people, some more than others. But I think, above all, my ethos and my guardrails to experimentation are nonviolence. And I'm not speaking in terms of physical nonviolence, but not violating another person or community's right to their own highest aspiration and sense of selfhood.
Very well said. That was not an easy question.
Yeah. Well, none of your questions have been easy, and that's why I love them. So I really appreciate this exchange. They're terrific questions.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
A little more interesting than NPR, I might add.
Now, Mitch, if someone out there wants to start, experimenting and become that seeker that you talk about on their own, what advice would you give them? What sort of things should they avoid, and what should they really be grasping at in the beginning?
Well, I mean, if you're taking your search seriously, you should always strive to be as educated as possible. It's not sufficient just to say, well, I'm into tarot, or I'm into Kabbalah, or I'm into this, or I'm into that. You should know something about where this stuff comes from. I think I love Western astrology. I practice Western astrology. I think the astrologer should know something about astronomy. I think the tarot reader should know something about the history of tarot. I think the Kabbalist should have some rudimentary working knowledge of Hebrew. I think the New Thoughter should know where some of his or her ideas come from. That's why I wrote the book One Simple Idea, which is a history of the positive mind movement. I think that we should be mature adults. We should be educated folk. And that gives you so much more freedom ultimately to really know what you're dealing with and what you're working with. So I would say grok to whatever you naturally grok to, follow your instincts. But once you've followed those instincts, learn the territory, know what you're really about, because it will enrich everything you're doing.
All right. Now, Mitch, I'm coming towards the end of our regular broadcast. I know I only have you for a limited amount of time. Is there something I should have asked or something you'd like to talk about that I didn't cover, or do you have any parting thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
No, not at all. I've really enjoyed your questions. I appreciate being able to discuss all this in a wide-ranging way. And I just want to encourage everybody's deepest search for 2019. Don't be limited by anyone. Don't be limited by anything. I've talked about standards. I've talked about education, and I believe in those things. But I also believe that I want you to be able to follow your highest instincts and aspirations in terms of what you're striving for and seeking in the world, and to experiment without anybody else's boundaries or preconditions.
Excellent. Absolutely. Where can people find you and your work, Mitch?
If they put my name into Google, they'll have no trouble finding me, Mitch Horowitz. That'll lead you to my website, mitchhorowitz.com. If you're interested in some of what we've talked about, or if you feel all itchy after the Satanism discussion, go to medium.com. You can read some of my articles there, throw my name into YouTube, combine it with any of these topics that we've discussed. You'll almost certainly find a lecture or an interview where I focus in on some of these things with great specificity.
Outstanding.
And of course, there's my book, The Miracle Club, which I'm very grateful for people reading. That's available everywhere: audio, digital, physical, even CD. So you can find that anywhere you buy books.
I'll vouch for all of that. I've been a fan of your work for a very long time, Mitch. I've followed you. I've watched your videos. I've read your books. I own your books. And I've even harassed you on social media, as you know. So
I welcome it.
Yeah, your latest effort, Miracle Club, is awesome. I gave it a 5-star review on Amazon. Folks, if you want to see what I had to say about it, you can see it there in the reviews on Amazon.com. Please go out there and pick up all of Mitch's work. Okay, folks, thank you again for being here. Thank you again to Mitch for being a guest on the show. Please go to weirdwebradio.com, click join the membership, or go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio, and you'll be able to join us in the bonus questions where we get a little bit deeper into the weird stuff. All right, folks, stay weird out there. Okay.
Now, how are we going to get weirder now that we've covered Satanism and, this and that?
Oh.
I've said something to alienate everybody. The David Icke fans will hate me. Anybody who doesn't like the sound of the word Satanism will hate me. How will we get weird?
Oh,
but
it always gets weirder. I'm telling you, it has to. It's part of the name of the show.
For it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I understand why some of these people might get mad at you. I applaud right out of the gate. I would just want to say I really applaud your willingness to say something that is just it's going to inspire and upset people on the same coin. I think that comes with a great deal of
courage. And I don't
courage.
mean to provoke. It's not my wish to provoke, but I have to be frank with people about where I'm coming from. Where I'm totally platform.
You do it from a place, I don't call it provoking. I think you come from a place of genuine integrity. And that's what I like about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bonus audio time, buddy. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. First question. What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit?
Oh, no question about that. Neville Goddard, who's buried on the island of Barbados. In fact, why don't we set this as a goal? You can come back and hold my feet to the fire next year. Did I see Neville's grave in 2019?
I like that.
That's a wish.
Yeah. Well, Neville's been a big influence on your work. I presume that's why you would like to go visit. What do you have a specific practice or something that you feel compelled to do when you enter a cemetery or visit a grave?
Not really. Growing up, there was a Jewish tradition where we used to put stones on a grave to show that we had been there. I'd like to put a stone on Neville's grave, a sign that I've been there.
I'm not familiar with that tradition. Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Rather than place flowers on people's graves, traditional Jews will place, of which I'm not, as you might have imagined, will place a stone on someone's grave. And it's a reminder that they've been there. It shows people that someone has been there, someone remembers. And it's a beautiful practice. I
like that. Yeah, I leave coins on graves. You can always tell when I've been somewhere.
That's cool. Yeah. That's great. I love it.
What do you believe awaits us after death?
That's such a question. I really don't know. I haven't the slightest, foggiest idea. Look, it could be that the materialists are correct and that once we're done, we're done. I suspect the Vedic point of view is correct, that we sort of go back into some eternal energy. But of course, I cannot discount recurrence, reincarnation, visitations by specters and ghosts. So sometimes under some circumstances, people seem to retain their persona after death, but I haven't any idea, which is why this life is precious.
I like that. So, I like it when people say, I don't know. It is an incredibly honest answer. I'll recommend to you, like I've recommended to many others, a man named Greg Taylor. He runs the Daily Grail website, wrote a book.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he wrote a book called, the exact title escapes me. It's something to the effect of, don't worry, there's probably an afterlife. And it's a collection of all the near-death experience research that's out there.
And you know what? I love Greg's use of the term probably.
Yeah.
Great Robert Anton Wilson said something I've always remembered, and we should all use this as our kind of our maxim for 2019, maybe. Anton Wilson said in an interview in Gnosis magazine that the problem he has with most conspiracy theorists is that they've never heard the word maybe. I thought that's it. Just the word maybe or the word probably it's magic, or the word often, rather than all the time, not sort of thinking and speaking in absolutes. If you can get accustomed to not thinking and speaking in absolutes, it can open up incredible vistas. I mean, just look at what happens when someone like Greg uses the term probably in his title. It's humorous. It lets you breathe. It's not doctrine or dogma.
Right.
It's very
helpful. Opens up discussion too. It doesn't, we were talking about earlier, it draws that line in the sand. It sort of removes the line and says, no, it's okay. Consider other possibilities.
So I'm with Greg. There probably is an afterlife.
I'm with Greg too. There's probably an afterlife.
Yes.
Well, moving on to more afterlife sort of things. This question comes from a card game called Morbid Curiosity. Would you leave your body to science or a body farm?
I suppose I would if I felt it would do some good. I certainly would. I'm an organ donor, so that's pretty much the same thing. So the answer would be yes.
Yeah, that's you had a very good response to that question. Many people get uneasy with it. Well done.
I mean, I want to know if it's a legit operation. I'm not interested in, being the subject of some ghoulish thing, but I could certainly, if it would help the march of inquiry, yes.
I've always sort of thought with
Yes,
my
no
physical
question.
remains, I just want to be cremated, but
More and more Americans do. More than half of them.
more because our
that-
our sun has an expiration date, and that's the ultimate result of it all anyway.
Yeah.
Has New Thought been featured in TV or movies?
It is. It's always featured, but it's never under that name, and that's fine. Because we as Americans tend to not like names or labels. Most people don't walk around saying, "I'm a New Ager, I'm this, I'm
Right.
that." But the M. Night Shyamalan movie Split, which is about a being who has a split personality, and his split personality allows him to actually take on different physical traits. That movie is steeped in New Thought. That's the first New Thought horror movie, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. In fact, there's a sequel coming out called Glass, which ties it into an earlier movie by M. Night Shyamalan called Unbreakable, which is one of my very favorite movies. And I would say if anybody wants to watch a truly thrilling movie, watch Split, because that's a New Thought horror movie, although the term never appears.
I didn't know that. That's really cool. Let's go. You've got other areas of interest. Let's consider Satanism too. Is there a place in cinematic history that people should go to see some form of Satanism you found entertaining or at least close to accurate?
Well, Rosemary's Baby is one of my very favorite movies, and I think one of the things I like most about that movie, and there are many things I like about it, is that the Satanists actually seem more likable than anybody else in it. So that's kind of curious and interesting. I would check out that movie, or if you've already watched it, watch it again. It's immortal. It's a wonderful movie.
Very cool. If you were going to build a monument to the greats, something like a Mount Rushmore of your own fields of study, who's going to be on it?
Oh, what a great question. Madam H.P. Blavatsky, because everything that we've talked about has her as its foundation in terms of her ability during her life to reopen the Western world and the Eastern world to questions of occultism. Madame Blavatsky would be on it. Neville Goddard would be on it because he was such a beautiful, self-directed thinker without any artifice. Manly P. Hall would be on it, the occult scholar. He opened me up to so many different questions. He wouldn't like or agree with everything that I'm into or everything that I'm talking about. And in that vein, I'd probably put Anton LaVey on it because I think he's an unsung magician of modern life and he deserves more credit than he's gotten. So that would be my Mount Rushmore. Madame Blavatsky, Neville Goddard, Manly Hall, and Anton LaVey.
Yeah, I like that.
And everybody can come visit.
I like most about that is every one of them have people out there who hate them.
Yeah,
just hate them.
Yes, they do, and they, they wouldn't like, and some of their followers wouldn't like all the things that I've said.
Yeah, I like that. That's sort of what led me to ask the question. I had a hard time putting the question together, but I thought it was important about books and authors and separating author from idea, because
yes,
I think there's a real possibility if things are allowed to continue to fester in the direction they have, you could end up with, public book burnings and real lynch mobs again. And it scares me a little bit.
We're not far away, and it comes from all directions, not just any one.
Yes. We're surrounded on all sides from these extreme sort of thoughts. And that's the reality I hope that one day people perceive before it's gone too far.
Yes, I agree.
Couple more questions for you, my friend. Every area has its own local folklore. Things that, like this spot was really important in history, but it's kind of weird. Or the really cool big haunted building, or the grave of the legendary figure. Or, like here we have historic, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. I live in Mattoon, Illinois. It's this historic folklore of the area. Where you live or where you're from or someplace you've been, what's one of your favorite pieces of local folklore?
Well, there's a tower on the banks of the Charles River that was in the town of Waltham, Massachusetts, that was built in 1899 as a kind of homage to the Viking explorer Leif Erikson, who supposedly founded a settlement on the banks of the Charles in the pre-Columbian age. It's called Norumbega Tower. And if people want to learn about it, it was the site of a very powerful ritual for me. If people want to learn about it, they can go to medium.com. I have an article there called The Best Spiritual Practice is the One You Invent Yourself. And I talk about Norumbega Tower there and show a picture of myself at the top of the tower where you're not supposed to be. I had to slither in and climb to the top. So that's a spot of local folklore, not quite local because I'm in New York City and this is in Massachusetts, but it's here in the Northeast, and I encourage people to visit.
That sounds really cool. I didn't know anything about that. Now, in your Medium article, do you explain what that powerful ritual was?
It was a ritual in which I just realized with absolute heartfelt, passionate certainty that I wanted to write. This was years ago. And I stood on top of that tower and I vowed to make it happen. I vowed and I called upon all invisible forces to come to me and to make that so. And it did occur.
Now, here's something I think you might like if you've not been exposed to it yet. Since you're exploring chaos magic and you explore this idea of invisible forces being around, I got this idea from a combination of talking to Chiron Armand and Aidan Wachter. Aidan Wachter wrote a book called 6 Ways. I highly recommend this. And in it, he talks about calling the spirits who help aid, guide, and protect me.
That's wonderful.
So that's what I do every day when I make my offerings and things in my own daily practice. I just step up to my altar and I say, I call the spirits who help aid, guide, and protect me. Because I think they know who they are. I don't have to name them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was that. I think that might be a practice you might enjoy experimenting with.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. The book is called 6 Ways. I'm going to get that book.
6 Ways. Yes.
Love it.
Fantastic book.
Thank you.
I have described it as the book I wish I had when I started.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm going to read that book.
And now when I teach, I make my own students get that book first. So that's how good I think it is.
Wonderful.
You've got one last question here, Mitch, and I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Lay it on me.
This question comes directly from Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
I stole it word for word from his show, and I have no shame.
Lay it on me.
All right. If you could have a gigantic billboard, anything with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or even billions of people, knowing that they would receive that message and understand it, what would it say and why?
It would say one word: try. Try. Because that has been the motto of some of the people I most love. And I want people to realize that they're bigger than they think they are.
Very cool. I like that. Simple, impactful. I think people will instinctually understand what it is. Although, with something like that, just as try, it would make me want to have a traffic stop a mile up the road and just randomly stop cars and say, when you saw the billboard, what did it bring to your mind?
We'll do like a sobriety checkpoint. But
a mental activity checkpoint.
Yeah. We'll do a checkpoint.
Okay, Mitch, we have come to the end of the Patreon questions. Thank you again for taking the time to be here.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Wish you all good things.
All right, folks. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for being members of Patreon. Thank you for your support. This show can only grow and get bigger with your help. So go out there and tell your friends, your family, and even your familiars. Stay weird out there, my friends.
Okay, gang, that's a wrap on this episode of Weird Web Radio. Once again, thank you all for listening. Now, it's time for you to go join the official Weird Web Radio membership. Go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio and you can choose your rewards and become a member today. Enjoy all the exclusive benefits, inside information, and plenty of bonus audio with each guest. Now, you can find the show at weirdwebradio.com and weirdwebradio.libsyn.com. The show is listed on Facebook and Twitter as Weird Web Radio, and you can find me on Instagram as just Lonnie_Scott. Please remember to rate and comment and share the shows that you like, and it helps others find us in all the search results. Shoot me an email if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you know someone that would be a great guest in upcoming episodes. You can send that to weirdwebradio@gmail.com. Seek the mysteries and delights in life, my friends. As always, stay weird out there.